Radull Live. Thanks for joining us. Remember, as you enjoy all the football action this weekend, remember you can place your bets with Betika, where there is no minimum bet. Actually, just one bob. One bob. When was the last time you saw one bob? With one bob, you can actually place a bet on betika.com and get on the way to winning a big. But remember to bet responsibly. Now today I have, every time I have a lady in the studio, I feel proud. I feel that there's so many women in sports. By the way, there's so many women in sports who are doing great things. Now, allow me to introduce Peris Mukoko. Peris, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you, Carol. How are you?
I'm fine. Leg aside. But you're a rugby player, so injuries are normal for you, eh?
They're temporary.
The temporary injuries. Now, Peris, the title I put on the flyer was World Rugby Educator. But when I asked you, what title can I give you? You're like, I wear so many hats. Take us through some of these hats that you wear, these feathers.
Okay, so I was first a rugby player.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I was in high school at St. Mary's School.
Mm-hmm.
So played rugby there. Picked up and was selected for the women's national team at that time.
Okay.
So 2005 through to 2007,
mm-hmm.
I had donned the national Kenya Lionesses jersey. At that time, we only had Safari Sevens and a tour for Elgon Cup. So we'd switch from sevens and then into 15s. Played the sport up to 2007, where I switched hats into being a referee.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but wait, when you were playing, let me take you back to when you were playing. Was there an active women's league at the time?
We only had 3 games in a year. So we'd play against 2 clubs.
Mm-hmm.
We were only 2 clubs at that time, sorry.
At the time you were playing for Kenya Harlequins?
Yes, I was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, so we had Kenya Harlequins and Mwamba. So, of course, during that time, playing for Kenya Harlequins, we'd play as a build-up for 7s, and we'd all get now bundled up in preparation for 15s because of the numbers. And then I also played for Mwamba at that time.
And you play for Queens and Mwamba?
It was more of the fact that we were training together and bundled up.
Mm.
Of course, when numbers start dwindling, you go to a club where the numbers are there. And because women's rugby hadn't picked up that much, as much as it is today, it was a way in which you'd stay in touch with the game.
Mm-hmm.
And just training for 7s and then 15s, you'd find in a calendar year, those are only a month or 2 months. What do you do with the rest of the 10 months?
And you want to play rugby, you want as much rugby as possible.
Yes. So that's how I switched into officiating, just to be in touch with the sport.
How do you make that transition from playing to officiating?
Interestingly, when I was in St. Mary's, there was always a tradition. If you play for the team, you also have to do a level 1 course of match officiating.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So that you're in touch with the laws of the game and you understand what it is. Blackrock tournament that was always held at St. Mary's.
Blackrock was, for those who don't know, it was a school's tournament.
Yes.
And it was either St. Mary's or Upper Hill who'd win.
Or RVA.
Oh, RVA.
Yes.
The guys of Nairobi school just went, huh?
they stick on the other side of Ayaki.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, at that time, we had the culture of the girls who were with at St. Mary's would assist or play, because in international baccalaureate, you end up looking for CAS hours. So creativity, action, service. So that's how you get hours. So that's how now we went into being touch judges and then assistant referees when I did my level 2.
But that's so useful, because in most of these sports we have people who just play, and then when they finish playing, you're like, okay, now that's when you start to look for other courses, be it refereeing, be it coaching. But if it's something you have to do while you're actually an active player, I think that's already progression.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Yes, and that's something that the coach at that time, who was Paul Odera for St. Mary's School, would always
Paul is
instill.
now the junior.
No,
Paul is now the 15th head coach.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Yeah, so, but it was always something that was ingrained, and then we'd have the likes of John Kagagi, was an educator, taking us through. So that's how you get to understand the laws, and of course, when you're cheering in the boys' team at that time in high school, you wouldn't wonder and ask, who's that guy in a yellow shirt on the pitch?
Mm-hmm.
Why is he making certain signals? You'd get to understand the law as you watch, and also run touch for the game as well.
So 2008, you stopped playing active rugby. You decided, I'm going to be a full-time referee.
Yes.
Wow. You didn't miss the game?
I still do, but I think officiating has opened a lot of doors in terms of being in touch with the game and just applying the law and the knowledge firsthand. Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. So from 2008, you decide you're going to be an educator. We're now in 2022. What is the last, how many years is that? 14 years?
Actually, in 2014, I got my educator license.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when now I switched to see how best to get more women involved in the sport. Because at that time, honestly, Carol, you'd find you're going in to ref 30 men, and you'd look at the numbers and you ask yourself, how comes we don't have women taking up officiating? So that's how I ended up going through the course of being an educator, so as to get and drum up more numbers for women in officiating.
And has that happened?
Yes, we're growing in leaps and bounds, and currently we have 3 on the development plan for women match officiating.
That's in Kenya?
That's in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So you find one is in Mombasa, Faith. We have another one who's called Nyambura in Nairobi, and Masidudi, who's actually in Laikipia.
And you officiate both men and women's?
Yes, the
rugby.
laws of the game cut across both genders.
What's it like, officiating men, telling them what to do?
Surprisingly, you find that rugby men have respect for the law of the game. So, because you're there as a referee to apply the laws of the game, the whistle through the communication, the listen.
There's a meme that was going around this week. You know, there's one female referee at the Women's Africa Cup of Nations.
Yes.
And there was a meme going around this week where one of the players was standing like this. And like, this is a lady, you know, there's a different level of respect that,
Yes.
And she's not joking, She's not any, for lack of a better word, weaker than the men who are doing this job.
Yes.
You know, you've gone through the training. Who educates you? Is it from World Rugby or Rugby Africa?
You have to get accreditation from World Rugby.
Mm-hmm.
Now, World Rugby has learning site in terms of the requirements for you to be an educator. You have to meet those certain requirements, and you also have to sit in for the course that is delivered. Of course, there's a regional trainer who oversees the training of all educators and trainers in Africa within the region. So you have to meet those standards, and of course the training needs for the different regions and also the country itself.
Generally, how has women's rugby developed? Because you're telling me before 2008, you were literally Harlequins and Mwamba and you played 3 times a year.
Yeah.
Now we're at a place where Kenya Lionesses, if I'm not wrong, was the first team to qualify for Tokyo 2020 from Kenya.
Yes.
Take me through the process of the growth of women's rugby over the last decade or so.
It hasn't been easy.
Mm-hmm.
However, with the World Rugby pushing for women inclusivity and even the participation, it trickles down regionally and now in Kenya as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're simply applying the strategy that World Rugby puts across through Rugby Africa and through Kenya. Of course, we have to meet the certain requirements in terms of the number of games that the players play, the women play. The growth, it's been more women coming in, so the numbers have increased. You'd find in one tournament that used to be held for the tenor side, you'd find over 150 girls participating in a tournament.
Wow.
And different ages as well. And currently we also have the Women's Kenya Cup, where you have...
Yes.
So now the shift of moving from having games on Sunday to having games on Saturday is what continues to get in the numbers. You find girls are also seeing the rewards in terms of the tournaments that are growing. So you wouldn't only have one tournament against our neighbors, Uganda, but you also have tournaments that are regionally. I'll give you a good example. Rugby Africa is holding a series of sevens qualifiers within the region. So there's some which are actually going on for both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
So you have teams coming in to participate because the structures are already there. For the structures to work, that's how we're able to implement and we get in the numbers.
And what is, because now when I look at women's rugby, there's Kenya Cup, they're involved in the sevens, an invitational side in the 7 series.
Yes.
The international 7 series.
Yes.
We're still an invitational side.
Yes.
But then we play Elgon Cup. Recently we were playing, was it Colombia? Which qualifiers were those?
Oh, Carol, that was the Women's World Cup qualifiers, which will be held this year in New Zealand and from October to November. So that's what we were fighting for in terms of qualification. So you find it's a matter of region. So you find Colombia, of course, is from South America. They emerged top, but only one team either from South America or Africa has to qualify in the slot.
Wow.
So it's...
But we missed by a whisker.
1 point, Carol. 1 point.
And in these countries, the women's rugby is professional, so to speak, as in they can earn a living from this. So us, like you have a full-time job.
Yes.
So rugby is sorry for lack of a better term, a side hustle, which it shouldn't be.
Hobby.
A hobby.
Yeah.
But because despite it being a hobby, we lose to a team like Colombia by 1 point. What does it mean about the level of talent in this country?
I'd say we pick from the lessons in terms of what did we do wrong. So, of course, it's a lot of things because at that time we had Tokyo. So most of the girls' numbers were in sevens. And some of the girls, because it was a 15s qualifiers. So, there are 2 flares of rugby. So you have the sevens and the 15s. So our preparation is where it was a bit of a lesson learned. That's where we went wrong. In terms of building on to the next, that's how we have the Women's Kenya Cup in order to prepare for 2025. We get more girls in preparation for that. It's semi-professional. And honestly, Carol, it has challenges because we do not get as much support as the men's game gets. But that does not mean that we simply just pack our bags and go. We keep driving.
For me, it's something to be applauded.
Yeah.
That we can get so close to the World Cup despite the fact that we don't enjoy the resources and support that other female rugby players in other countries get. Yes. I mean, it shows it gives a story about the spirit and the talent that we have, and which means that there's so little we need to do to match those standards. Yeah. You're also a director at the Kenya Rugby Union.
Yes, I am.
What programs are there in place to see that the women are grown to where at least the guys are? Because even the guys are not yet fully professional to some instances. They also have to have day jobs. Yeah. But what programs are there for the women that we can one day see them as regulars on the international circuit, as qualifying for the World Cup? And I think we'll qualify before the guys.
Yes.
Don't quote me.
It's something that, on a realistic perspective, yes, I definitely believe in this women because I've been part of the team. I know the struggles. I know what it takes. And what structures or setups are actually there, we're implementing them. We are moving from having 10 aside to 15s. Because it's a matter of how do we build that. Getting more girls involved in the sport. Understanding that you can serve the game at different levels. You don't only have to be a player.
Yes, like you. Now.
Yeah, you can always switch. You can be a match official. You can be an S&C coach. You can be an assistant coach. You can be an administrator. and you play a key role in ensuring that the women's game grows. So that's part and parcel of how best do we implement it.
And you also have so many titles. Director, Kenya Rugby Union, World Rugby Educator, Rugby Africa Referees Committee member. How did they find you and decide we're going to recruit you for Rugby Africa? That's huge. For those who don't know, Rugby Africa is CAF of rugby.
Oh, it's such an honor because I'm actually happy that I'm giving back to the game. I always say that I'm a servant of the game because I've played, so I've served. I officiate, I serve. I educate, I serve. Now it's time to use those lessons to build. So from the Rugby Africa Referee Committee, it is setting the standards of improving the refereeing standards regionally to the world class level as per World Rugby standards, whereby we are mentoring with the guidance, of course, of the Rugby Africa Referee Committee chair, and even the members themselves, because we're all scattered across Africa. So implementing the standards, coming up with motivating the match officials, and also mentoring different people, because remember Africa, we have both Anglophone and Francophone.
Yes.
So it's building that niche, and I think we have an upper hand in trying to build that standards, because there's a pathway from the Kenya Rugby Union. It has to go through Rugby Africa for it to get to World Rugby. So it's just establishing those pathways and ensuring that all the boxes are ticked to the World Rugby standards.
Do we have, I don't hear as much, maybe rugby people just don't whine as much as the football fans do,
Yeah.
but I don't hear a lot of issues of poor refereeing, especially in like Kenya Cup or anything. So does it mean the standards are high, or you guys just know how to keep secrets?
I'll say like any household,
Mm-hmm.
there are always small things that you know when to let out and when to keep in. But in terms of referee standards, there are World Rugby regulations that are govern our union in terms of how best to address the different concerns. In terms of working on the referee standards, that's why we're there, to see how best to actually improve on it. Everyone has an opinion, but
especially if your team is losing.
yeah, but in terms of building up, it's always constructive feedback, and using that constructive feedback, be it negative or positive, to build onto it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2021, you were named top 40 under 40.
Yay.
Congratulations. How did that make you feel?
Honored, because you find that most of the time when it comes to just making the cut, it's very few sportswomen who make it there. So being named as top 40 under 40 in 2021 was a privilege, and it's also a good motivation for the young girls who are looking at rugby and saying that I want to get there. So it's good, because it's for us as the women who are actually involved in rugby that goes to show that there are no glass ceilings. You can always surpass and go to the next level when it comes to a sport that you love.
But I like it that there are people like you, because I'm sure there are young girls thinking, I want to be a sports person, but which sport can I select? And rugby is probably looked at as, that's a little bit rough, eh? Maybe that's not a sport I want to do. But then they look and they say, hey, Peris, Mukoko, there are all these ladies who play rugby professionally, who are now coaches, who are now committee members in Rugby Africa, and like, I want to be like you. So I just want to thank you for being one of the role models. I want us to take a short break, and when we come back, I want to know what more we can do as fans. What more can corporate Kenya do to try and propel rugby to become fully professional in Kenya for both men and women? So that discussion is coming after the break.
Captain tupigie Risto.
Mabron Jace. Yeah. Wacha ni washow vile msupa alinituma vitungu sokoni. Yaja? Nilikuwa naenda kulamba bet juu ya game moja. Nikauliza, yani naweza lamba bet juu ya game moja? Alafu madhawa vitungu akadai, jamani su kesho tuna betika. Nikamuuliza, naweza jitoa tu? Mzee mkoko akatokea akadai, ni mara ngapi ndakushow? Na betika unaweza cash out na withdraw bila charges.
Ala? Eti cash out na no withdrawal charges?
Kabisa. Ukibetika, unapata mo. Pata mo na betika.
Hii story imeletwa kwako na Betika, the official sponsors of happiness. Gambling can be addictive. Play responsibly. Not for persons under 18 years of age. This advert is authorized and regulated by the Betting Control and Licensing Board. License number BK281. Betika, jukwaa la mabingwa.
Welcome back. Remember, lots of football action this weekend. The African Cup of Nations is still on, and at some point, Arsenal needs to play. We can't keep postponing matches. And yes, you can place your bets at betika.com and win big. Remember, there's no minimum bet. You just need a shilling to place a bet on betika.com. And then make sure you get the app on your phone. It's so much easier to use the app. Just remember betika.com. But also remember to bet responsibly, strictly for people over the age of 18 years. Now, we're still here with Peris Mukoko, who wears very many hats for rugby, for women's rugby, for men's rugby, world educator, director of Kenya Rugby Union. You've told me what you've done, which is so impressive in terms of educating yourself on refereeing, educating others about refereeing, being a referee, having played the game, having mentored young girls. What more can we do? Because you can't achieve big things by yourself. So what more, let's start with as a director of Kenya Rugby, you're in management of rugby. What more can the management do?
As a management, of course, we work as a team through the guidance of course, the chairman, Odor Gangla. And of course, we're in different committees. So it's just getting that synchrony in ensuring that we continue to grow the game for women's and men's, and even the young boys and girls as well.
I know one of your biggest challenges, which brings me to what more corporate can do, is how to pay these players, how to pay the referees, how to pay the players, how to get the clubs to become independent as well. What responses do you get when you go to corporate Kenya and tell them, you know what, we want you to sponsor the league? You know, what challenges are you facing?
One, post-COVID, it's basically in terms of the return of investments. So you find most corporates ask what value addition would it actually give. But with the current Kenya Cup League being aired live, so you find some of the clubs are reaping the benefit, some of the sponsors are reaping the benefit, because it's through the league that the union is able to ensure that all these boxes are ticked. So of course there's some challenges here and there. Some want to keep away because of the challenges or just the fact that it's post-COVID and they're building up. But we're hoping that once they're back on their feet, we welcome them with open arms to Kenya Rugby. What
can fans do? Because we know corporates are not charities, they're businesses, they want their money back.
Yes.
What more can fans do?
Supporting the clubs. So you can start by supporting the clubs, supporting the clubs through attending the games in order to get the revenue running through the clubs. Because it's through the clubs that we get the league going. It's through the clubs that we're able to get the national women's going. So when there's a women's league kicking off, go support the women. Ensure that the revenue that the gate charges actually collect, it goes into the women's development and even the men's development as well. So it's through that we ask the fans to do that.
And gate people underestimate the power of having fans in the stands. The last 2 years have been very difficult for any sport, for any business because of COVID. And for the longest time, fans weren't even allowed back into Kenya rugby games. And what we've seen, especially in this year's Kenya Cup, we've seen the community clubs like Mwamba, like Impala. We've seen clubs not able to compete against those clubs that have corporate support. And how has that affected these community clubs? Because they were thriving at some point. And now I look at the table and I'm like, is that Impala down there? Is that Mwamba?
Yeah.
You know? What more how important is it for us to turn up?
Very important. The struggles are there because you find the close to 2 years when guys were away from rugby, a lot of people were dealing with mental health, financial, looking for a way to exert their energy. And some are coming back. COVID hit a lot of people. And not only people, but also clubs. So it's a matter of seeing how best we can support them, be it being part and parcel of the club in terms of where can we help, where can we assist. Because it's all about coming together. It's teamwork. That's how we are able to have Impala
Pay for
team,
membership.
pay for membership.
Pay at the gate.
And also support the clubs, because you find sometimes you're going to watch a game and they have a small canteen. Through that, it's a little goes a long way, yeah.
I think what we also need to do, because Kenyan fans are so critical, when we're playing international sevens, we're like, oh, look at how they did in Dubai, that was terrible. We're very quick to criticize, but we don't realize that those players are built from their clubs.
Yes.
So if you don't support them from here, don't expect them to achieve here, because they need that same support, you know?
Yeah.
And I think people don't understand that just me going to Ngong Road or to Railways or to the Lion's Den on Thika Road or Nakuru, Cabras, they don't realize that that has an effect on what I watch on the International Seven Circuit. Because at the end of the day, the players are developed through the leagues.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to give lectures to the fans.
Yes.
Guys, don't just be on Twitter going, yeah, that was rubbish, ooh, ball handling. It starts from somewhere.
It does. If not, they can always just come and train as well. Then they move the fingertips on the pitch.
Know how hard it is.
Yeah, it is.
Know how hard and what these rugby players go through. I remember that when Kopo was 15's captain, and he was taking us through a day in the life of a rugby player. And you're in the office the whole day, yet you're in training, which means your training is 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. and your training is 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Yes.
At what point do you even have with your family, and then you work the whole day?
Or even yourself.
Or even yourself,
Yeah.
you know? And we've seen things like, you mentioned mental health. I had Ombachi here the other day, late last year, and Ombachi was very open about his mental problems and how he tried to commit suicide and how difficult it was. And here we are, criticizing him on the international stage, that yet you don't know what these players...
The blood and sweat they put through.
You've been a player. How difficult was it? Because there's pressure on you to... Maybe we didn't have so much focus on women's football, women's rugby, when you were playing, 2006, 2007. But right now there's pressure. When the Lionesses went to Tokyo, there's pressure for them to perform. Yeah,
there was even pressure when they were playing against Colombia. Yeah, so it has a knock-on effect. And most people do not understand what goes behind ensuring the player is ready. Even match officials, even the coaches, even the administrators, the people who support the rugby from the different sides a lot goes into implementing it, and a lot of dedication and sacrifice goes into it.
Are there programs within the rugby union to deal with things like mental stress of players?
Currently, that's something that we're looking at building. Of course, the national teams have some sessions more on mental strength and build. And of course, you find that they're usually led by the head coaches in terms of getting guys prepared, getting guys aware, because we fight different battles, Carol, every single day. Once you're done with the game on the pitch, you switch to prepare yourself to go home. What you did not deal with before, you also have to deal with that. If it is not that, it is school. If it is not school, it is work. So we're all dealing with different battles, and it's a matter of how best do we manage ourselves? How best can we support each other? Even as the fans, how best can you support them?
And understand
them, yeah.
What more can the government do? You did tell me you're a civil servant, so I know you need to choose your words. Public servant, sorry. Yeah. So you do have to choose your words carefully. But just to give you an example, like in football, the other day the clubs wrote to this caretaker committee and said, we have about 9 out of the 18 Premier League clubs about to collapse financially. And in reality, a club should operate independently. It's not the union or the government to fund a club, but there is the understanding of what clubs have gone through, especially in the last 2 years. And football may be a little bit different in that it's not just been the last 2 COVID years. Football just has a bad name. So even for a club to walk into a corporate and say, sponsor us, they're like, you football people are just thieves. You know, we're just put in one pot. You know, they don't even bother to try and understand. And it's not their job to try and understand.
Because of perception.
So, because of perception. So football has its own struggles. And so they have come and said, actually, the government, you need to bail us out. Just the way you bail out, whether it's Kenya Airways, whether it's Parastatal, you need to bail out football, or the league is going to collapse in the next week or two. Because if 9 clubs collapse out of 18, we don't have a Premier League. You know? So it's not that it's the government that has failed us in this aspect, but given the environment we're operating in now, surely, especially if the men's clubs are suffering, what's happening to the women's clubs? You know? And is there a bailout? Can we get a bailout from the government? Is that what we should be asking for?
It's, I think I'll just say that there's so much sometimes that the government can do based on the requirements and maybe the objectives. They support where they can and when they can, and we're very thankful for that. And sometimes you find it might not be sustainable because they can only meet and sponsor if it's events. For example, if it's the women's World Cup qualifiers, they can come in. If it's the men's 7 series, they can come in. But trickling down to clubs, I think that's something that they can actually help, because the national teams would not exist without the support of the clubs. So that's what we're seeing, how best we can actually do.
Because we are in unique times.
Yes.
We are in unique times. I know you're being diplomatic, and I'll leave it at that. I don't have to be diplomatic. But if the government can see that sport, and in this case rugby, is a business, just like the Kenya Airways you bailed out, just like these big companies that are bailed out. Sport is a business, and if one arm collapses, it's all going to collapse. And here's an industry that can resolve our employment crisis. You know, it can employ so many people. Not, as you say, not just players. You can have coaches, referees,
administrators,
nutritionists, lawyers, doctors. You can have everything, every profession that can support sport. So
even the fourth estate,
because players need representation.
True.
You know, so if I think if the government looks at sport as a business, not as a hobby, as a business, there's so much more. Where would you like to see Kenya Rugby go?
I'll take
rugby and Kenya Women's Rugby.
Okay, I'll take you back on just the government. Most sponsors are not aware about some rebates they get So it's something that they can consider. So they can look at it in terms of how can they actually sponsor. So that's something they can actually do. So
there are rebates they get, like
this
tax breaks and stuff, if they sponsor sporting events.
Yes, as long as it is in line and in accordance with the requirements as per the Act. So
they should go and research that.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's their homework.
But they should also realize the value.
It does.
The value. If instead of using models, use sports people. I'm not taking work away from models, but here is a sports person who goes through, by the time you're at the top of your game, you're disciplined, you work hard, you have all these attributes that every company would want to associate with.
Yeah.
So why not use a sports person in your ads? You know?
It's something they can actually work with.
In the same breath, do our sports people actually know their value?
That's a challenge because you find some don't. It's a matter of desperation. So you find it's a carrot and stick method. So I dangle a carrot in front of you and say, this is what I'll give. But you do not know the long-term value. So if you sit down with some sportsmen, some do, some don't. So I think it's a matter of what can we do as a union or even as sports federations to ensure that the sports people, one, should never underestimate their value, underestimate what it is that they can actually progress and even build on. So, because I'll just use as a good example. Look at the epitome of EPL or even NFL.
Yeah.
How best can we get that model into our sports federations? You find professional player in the NFL, as an example, plays only 3 months, but the contract they sign.
Because the value they give.
Because they understand and they implement. But you find that's something that, one, we need to tap into for them to understand. And we also need to implement it. Yeah.
I know that rugby elections are coming up.
Yes.
You're a director at the moment.
Yes.
Will you be running?
Yes.
For?
Vice chair.
Okay, that's a bad laugh. But why not?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
You've been in the game. You've been a director. How long have you been a director?
This will be my 2019. This should be my 3rd year. Yeah.
I know for a fact women are very organized.
Yeah.
The other day I was interviewing Adela Mrush, the former Harambee Stars head coach, and he was telling me that he has more faith in women as sport managers simply because we're organized, you know. And I don't know whether we suffer as women, or that we have different challenges, that when you're in a position to change another life, you can sacrifice a lot to do that. It's
quite interesting because from what you've said, let's look at countries that have been run by women. Tanzania, let's not go far. Hi. Let's go across the Pacific. New Zealand, Germany.
The other day, Sierra Leone, a small country.
Yes.
In football, their federation president is female.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yeah. It's because you find with us women, it's I think that's how we wired in terms of ticking the boxes. And we're not, we tend to be more selfless in terms of I check on Carol first, I ask how she is, before I ask myself how I am. So it's, and at the same time we ensure that there's equal distribution when it comes to certain things. Case in point, we'll use our mothers as examples. They always used to serve us first before they serve themselves. And
it's nature.
It's nature.
Inbuilt.
It's inbuilt. So it's just a matter of how best can we use that. And also in terms of pressure, we tend to absorb more. Application. I think we're more detail oriented I'll use an example. For example, the women, you'll find any sports that women play that also men play, you'll find they tend to perfect. If it is the art of the kicking or the passes or even the serving of the ball, they tend to perfect it. Because that's how we are wired.
Built.
Yeah.
You know, it makes so much sense because if you look at, let me take you back to football. If you look at how Harambee Starlets perform versus how Harambee Stars perform, yet Harambee Starlets don't get half the recognition. They do so well regionally.
Yeah.
I know they're going to qualify for the World Cup before the men do. Sorry, guys. I know my friends are there. They're busy posting comments there.
Yeah.
But it's a fact. They're shining with less. Kenya Lionesses shining
With less.
with less. I'm not saying the men have it all together, but
Yeah.
if we had equal resources, I was hosting some Harambee Starlets here the other day, and they're like, we've never even heard of 250 million that was given to Harambee Stars.
Yeah.
They're former players who are owed a total of like 250,000 for like 4 or 5 years ago, and they can't even be paid that.
Yeah.
250,000. But Harambee Stars were given 204 because they qualified for AFCON. Our women are regulars.
Yeah.
They do so well on the, regionally with no recognition.
Little
I don't know if
resources.
they even know what State House looks like, you know.
Yeah.
Yet they managed to achieve. The same with the Lionesses, you know. Same with so many women's sports. Right now we have, what's her name? Angela Okotoye at the Australia Open Juniors.
Yeah.
The federation was telling me they couldn't even get money from the government to go for the qualifiers, the Africa Junior Championship, where she qualified for Australia. But they're so quick to tweet and say, oh, well done, we have a Kenyan in Australia.
Yeah.
So we need to pay more attention to our women's sports.
Yeah.
I think we can really excel. You know, you look at countries like America, football or soccer,
Yeah.
women better known.
And you see what actually happened in terms of
Japan, the
yes.
women footballers do better than the men. France,
yeah.
okay, the men are world champions, but still, the women do extremely well.
Yeah.
They're a football nation. So I
Yeah.
think we need to pay more attention to women. And I hope you get it, Vice Chairman of Kenya Rugby.
Oh, thank you very much, Carol.
And then in another few years, Chairman.
Yeah.
And then you conquer Rugby Africa.
One step at a time.
One step at a time, one
Yeah.
step at a time. What's in store for this year as we wrap?
What's in store for this year? We have Commonwealth qualifiers that will be held in South Africa for the men and in Tunisia for the women's. That's sevens. And then we also have the women's 15s Rugby Africa qualifiers coming up as well. And more women's games for 15s, sevens.
Both in the league and Algon Cup.
Yes, and regionally. So we have both locally, regionally. So calendars are of course going to be full, come from March all the way till June and all the way till September as well.
That's a far cry from when you used to play 2 months a year.
It has grown and it's really a good review when you look back and you reflect and you say this is something that had we started then, you can imagine how much would have actually achieved. But now that we are big,
You've taken off.
Exactly.
You're no longer on the runway.
Yeah, no one ever takes off from a skyscraper. You always start gradually and you take one step at a time. And it's through that support that we're hoping to see funds. Of course, you have to follow the MOH guidelines and the CDC guidelines when they're coming to support the team. And also the support that we give the women's. When you're able to see, even if it's a lady who's come from just being a player. Carol, you can imagine she finishes playing, she's a mother, she's a big sister, she's also the breadwinner. And a lot of that, most of those challenges, a few things that we can actually change. So in terms of looking at the rugby calendar, there's a lot. There's even the Women's World Cup in New Zealand in 2022, the one which we fell short of.
Just missed.
Of 1 point.
But we're targeting the next one.
Yes. And building up into 2025 for the Women's World Cup. And even the men's qualifiers for World Cup is also coming up in France as well. So we wish them all the very best. And we're hoping to hear the national anthem being played at world stage when they make it to the finals. So that's...
Yeah, ambitious but possible.
Yes, we can only dream as big as our hopes, because you never know what drive it gives. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Peris, for coming. Peris Mukoko, thank you so much. Do you have any parting shot? Do you have any advice for the young girls who want to get into rugby and are thinking, is it going to pay me? Am I going to play? Am I going to be looked after?
Oh, Carol, thank you very much for having me on the show. Parting shot to the young girls who are looking at rugby, or even any sport in general. Pick up your boots, pick up your sports shoes, go to the pitch. You never know whether it's a yes unless you try. You never know how many boundaries you can break unless you try. And as part of what the Women Unstoppable was being campaigned for World Rugby was running, is at first you try, you don't succeed, then you try again. So it's a matter of always trying and trying and trying. And at the end of the day, when we look back, we'll ask them, try and stop us. And that's how you're able to actually ensure that you're able to create a pathway for your next sister, for your daughter, for your son, for that sport.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Peris.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best this year and beyond.
Thank you very much, Carol, for having me. And I'm hoping to see you coming to cheer the girls.
Challenge. Yes, I need to. But thank you guys. And if you're watching, please also go and watch and see the girls. Go and see the guys as well. Pick a team, support a team. It's always more fun when you're on a side, you know. And then thanks for watching Radull Live. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.